Let me explain to you how the AI bubble will end. So there's two things that you want to understand about right now. One, everybody already knows that AI is a bubble, that this kind of growth is not going to continue forever. By that I mean the growth of the price of these stocks. And even right now, we're seeing some signs of that. But the second thing that everybody knows but are not admitting to themselves that they know is that actually AI is an impossibility. That AI actually will not deliver on the promises that it's making. Stuff like generalized intelligence. All right, now, whenever evidence comes out about this, investors will rationalize it away as unreliable or only a possibility, or they'll say something like time will tell, because the so called investor class has always been about rationalizing their decisions away. Because what they've been doing for a long time is indistinguishable from gambling. So whenever you have the evidence of AI not be able to work ever, whether it's a study that shows that it's no matter how much more resources or hardware you give it, it seems to plateau, or some philosophical, logical argument that tells you that AI, LLM, is a parrot that uses probability to build its communications, its statements, and those have no logical rigor. You can show people, okay, this is an AI, and they use it, and then they tell you complete nonsense, literally making up stuff and being overly confident about it. All of that is evidence. But investors will look at this and they'll say, oh, okay, well, it isn't there yet, but it will be there one day and it's going to be great and everything. But deep down inside, they know um, this is probably not true. And the bad feeling will keep growing. And that's really important to understand, that they have this feeling inside of them, this bad feeling, and this will keep growing every time there's a little bit of evidence. So at the conscious level, they're going to be explaining it away. But deep down inside, they're not feeling so good. They're feeling uneasy. They're feeling anxious. They're feeling worried. That's going to be really important to understand. Because the next thing that'll happen eventually is that as the AI companies' stocks keep going up and as they are building more of these AI programs and buildings and etc., one day, for no real explicable reason, there will be a sell off. And this sell off is not going to happen all at once. It's going to be one moment, a certain group is going to sell off what they have. All right, so the price will go down of those stocks, and then people at that lower price point have already said to themselves, okay, if it goes down to this level, I'm going to sell. And then when it goes down even further, another group is looking at that price and says, well, I'm going to sell. And so it'll cascade all the way down. All right. Now, this could happen one stock at a time. It could happen regarding a whole index, for example, semiconductors. Um, it could work. It could look that way for QQQ. Okay, this could happen as an index fund. It could happen one company at a time. But in any case, it'll cascade all the way down. And as one company gets sold off, it makes everybody else worry, and then it'll keep cascading. So it's like you can think of this as one domino falling and knocking over the rest. All right, so it'll go all the way down, and we'll have a huge crash. This might. This is not going to take only one day. It's going to unfold over weeks, over months, and then at some point it'll plateau again. So it won't keep going down any further. This is what I call the stage where the dust clears. All right, so you have the dust clearing. There'll be some sort of post hoc rationalization. of course, that purports to explain away what had happened. And then people will claim these things, even though there's no good evidence for it. Why will they do that? Because they want to make money off of advertising, make money off of those clicks. They want to maintain their reputation. They want to build their reputation. They want to say, I told you so, or I knew it, or hey, I know exactly what happened. Okay, this is it. Because people have lost their money, and people will look at it and people will panic and be like, well, what's going on? They want answers, and they're just going to accept whatever answers are given to them. In a sense, it's kind of like a lot of religions work that way. Not every religion can be correct by logic, and so somebody's dying or somebody's relative has died, someone's loved one has died, and they want answers. And so they're not going to be really logical at that point. They're going to buy into the best story that appeals to them. And it's going to be the same case when they lose all this money. Okay? Now, another reason why people give explanations is to convince themselves they're in control. And we covered that when we talked about the all these post hoc rationalizations that manifest as cliches. All right, anyways, you have all these explanations, and none of them really are based off of any kind of evidence because you didn't do a survey. You didn't ask all these people why they sold and that kind of thing. They just sold. And so you're coming up with a reason after the fact. Then eventually, after that, you'll have all these articles coming out saying, oh, why the sell-off was overdone, why you should buy back in, essentially. They'll also explain to you, quote unquote explain, that AI companies never promised the moon. They did what they were realistically expected to do. They did improve productivity. They did improve worker efficiency, and so forth. Now, very little of that is going to be true. What they're trying to do is manage your expectations post hoc, after the fact. Okay, so they're trying to manage their reputation and everything. What about these companies that bought into AI? So they were a customer of AI and they laid off or they made redundant or they fired all of these people that used to work for them because they thought they could replace them with AI. And of course, by now we know that AI doesn't work. So what will happen there is that they are going to start to have to slowly hire people back. Why are they slowly hiring people back? Because there's no new products to justify a huge amount of new employees. They also probably do not have actually the money there because in a time of crash, there's not a lot of money to be available to be used. So you're not going to really be able to hire so many people anyway. So you hire people back at a slow rate though because you need them because the AI didn't work out. But what will the companies say? Will they ever admit their mistakes? No. They will say that they're growing. They'll say that they're growing, they'll lie about it, and they'll say, oh, that's why we're hiring back more people. We're a growing company. They won't admit it because this is part of the hubris of American businessmen, I suppose you could say. In any case, you simply cannot admit it. Even if you, deep down inside, you know for sure and you consciously know you're going to be, if you're a businessman, um, you know, these people are going to lie, essentially. Now, what about the American common classes? Right? You're just an employee. Maybe you work for these companies. Maybe you held stock in these companies. Maybe you're simply not directly related to these companies, yet the unemployment and the lack of the fact that you have all these people who lost their jobs are no longer buying food at your restaurants or shopping at your stores, whatever it is. Okay, so you're indirectly but surely affected. What about the American common class? What about the common classes in places like South Korea or Taiwan or Europe or anywhere else that was connected to this? Okay, are you going to recover? No. You're not going to recover because you've lost. You know, the common classes will lose almost nearly everything in both stocks and in employment opportunities because you probably lost your job or your wages were suppressed uh, or you weren't making as much money. So you've lost all that time, and then there might be a gap in your resume because of this. There probably will be, and it'll be harder for you to get hired again, particularly since you've got new graduates from college and so forth that you have to compete with. So it's going to be a bad situation. There's not really much I can say that is optimistic here because in order to time this, um, you have to have a lot of luck. You don't know exactly when this will happen. Will this continue for 2 months, for 2 years? This bubble? When will it pop? You don't really know. And so you have that saying the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. Well, the reality is the market is inherently irrational. Um, it, it's like, why does all of a sudden all these birds that were eating the bread on the ground or the seeds on the ground or the fries on the ground in the parking lot, all of a sudden they fly off? It's we don't know. No, nobody really knows. None of the birds know. Um, it simply happened, and you can't time that. So you could try, but that's not really something that you can reliably do, and you could lose a lot of money. So, anyways, one thing that I want to emphasize here is that simply because uh, simply because it looks like you have control over the situation doesn't mean you actually have control over a situation. And a lot of times it's simply good to know that there's nothing you could have really done. That you were a victim of circumstances of these large institutions of the corruption of the American political order. Um, and sometimes it just helps to know this because otherwise you might spiral into some kind of self blame or even self hate, and that's the last thing that I'd like you guys to do.